Welcome to Week 5 of the President's Athletic Conference Football Focus. I'm Waynesburg University senior Andy Stanko, and this week our focus zeroes in on the Saint Vincent College Bearcats. St. Vincent enters Week 5 as one of 4 unbeaten teams in conference play, with its biggest test of the season thus far coming up in Cleveland, where the Bearcats meet another unbeaten team in Case Western Reserve. Each week, the PAC Football Focus features one team from around the conference. We'll take a look into the program and highlight Saturday's matchups to get you ready for the weekend with the PAC Pregame Show following the Football Focus. 2 other Waynesburg University students and I will break down every matchup involving PAC teams in Week 5. Coach Ron Dolciato is in his 3rd season at the helm of Saint Vincent. He inherited a football program that had not won a game in back-to-back seasons and had won just 10 times since the school brought football back in 2007. With a 4-0 start to the season, Dolciato has won 12 games in 2+ years on the job. He's leaned upon his experience as a player during John Carroll University's turnaround in the 1980s and his experience on JCU's coaching staff.
You know, we were in the midst of 15 straight losing seasons, and I was a player, and we got a new coach, and, you know, he talked about, you know, what we were going to do with the program and how we were going to be in the playoffs. And believe it or not, back then I didn't even know there were Division III playoffs, but I'm not that old yet. But that program turned around, and, you know, so there was, over the years, learning from all the coaches that, you know, I worked under, especially Coach Scaife over at Thomas More now. I mean, we worked together for 20 years. You know, you learn how to do things the right way, and over at St. Vincent, that's what we just, all those ideas and all those beliefs, you know, we brought into St. Vincent. We knew it wasn't going to be a quick fix, and we're still a work in progress. But obviously, we're excited to be where we are. You know, hopefully we could keep this thing going. But we know the program is going to get better and better every year. So there is a blueprint, and we've been following it. The community over here at St. Vincent and our players, everybody's excited where we're going with the program. And as a head coach and our coaching staff, we are extremely pleased with what's going on, but we also know there's a lot of work to go. So that's where we are.
At 4-0, St. Vincent has already matched its win total from each of the last 2 seasons. The difference for the Bearcats? One word: discipline.
You know, regardless of what happens down the road here, this is our best team because the discipline we're playing with. You know, you guys do a great job, and you follow the PAC, and you know St. Vincent, and we've been probably over the first 2 years, the thing that really lacked from our perspective is discipline on the field. And this year we are much more disciplined on the field, and, you know, our kids are very focused, under control. They understand the ramifications if we're not playing disciplined football. And I think that is the main difference, and that's why we are where we are. I think, you know, we've played some very competitive games. They've all been competitive. And, you know, if you're not disciplined and you're not accountable, you don't win games like that. So I think that is the biggest difference, and I think our kids understand that. And, you know, we instilled that in the off season, how much you have to be accountable for your own actions. And I think it's paid really big dividends for us so far.
2 numbers that jump off the page in the PAC statistical leaderboards for St. Vincent are the red zone offense and 3rd down numbers. The Bearcats enter Week 5 16 of 16 in the red zone with 14 touchdowns and a 50% 3rd down conversion rate after finishing dead last in that category in 2015.
We were not a good red zone team, and we were a horrible 3rd down team last year. So, you know, I think it really does come down to believing in yourself. Our offense believes in every time we get the ball, we believe we're going to score. And I think that discipline factor is such a big part of it. You know, we're not making critical mistakes in the red zone. We're not getting foolish penalties. You know, we get down there and we know it's been a point of emphasis for us all year. You know, we get inside that 20, we're scoring. And, you know, when we kick field goals, that's a disappointment to us, but, you know, we'll take the 3 points. But it really is, I think, all about our kids being more disciplined this year and really believing in what we're all about.
The leading passer in the PAC through 4 weeks of the season is not W&J's Pete Coughlin, not Case Western Reserve's Rob Kuda. It's Saint Vincent's Derek Stewart. Stewart was named the PAC's Offensive Player of the Week for the second time this season after throwing for over 400 yards and 7 touchdowns just last week.
I'll tell you what, I've coached some very good quarterbacks over the 30 years. Coached a couple NFL quarterbacks. Derek's good. I mean, and everybody asks me the same question. Where did he come from? He's from California, the state of California. I always say that because people think California, PA. We had a really strange happening last year at the end of our season where we went into spring ball without a quarterback. DJ Ocean Kelly was playing quarterback in spring just to have somebody run quarterback, and so was Adam Indoff, one of our H-backs. So we didn't have a quarterback, so we went out and looked for quarterbacks, and I found Derek on a recruiting website, and he was looking for a team. He was looking for a home. He's been around, and basically I asked him, who else is recruiting you? He said, absolutely nobody. And I asked him why, and he said, because I only have 1 year to play. And I said, well, we'll take you for a year, and because we didn't have any incumbent quarterbacks at all. And looked at the campus, came down, and he has fit in so well with our kids. He's a great, very mature player, very mature person, great person. And I think it shows. I mean, the biggest thing about his ability is he doesn't get rattled. Nothing bothers him. And learning the system, we came in, we threw the playbook at him. He knew the playbook in about 3 days. And, I think that is his ability to absorb information has been amazing. And, we think he's one of the best quarterbacks in the conference.
Stewart has weapons to go to all over the field. 5 different skill position players for Saint Vincent have had multiple touchdown games this season in just the first 4 weeks. Coach Dolciato has stressed team first, me second attitudes, and is getting it from all of his playmakers.
It's been a pleasure. There has been no selfish play. You look at a guy like Shavonte Kraft, who is an amazing running back and gets better and better the more he gets the football. But now, we got a Jannard Dorsett, who played a little last year, but he was coming off a knee injury. He wasn't 100%. And Jannard's dynamic. I mean, he's fast. He can do things that, really are different than Shavonte. So they complement each other. Unfortunately, they're not going to have big stats for the year. They're sharing carries. Shavonte and Jannard there's no competition between them. When they're called upon, they go out and they do their job. The receiving corps is the same way. We have 3 really good receivers. Damon Black is, obviously I think he's our best, but Dietrich and DJ are 2 extremely good football players, and everybody's unselfish. And I'll tell you what, Ryan Crawford, our H-back, is really the glue of that offense, and he's just kind of a person that nobody recognizes because he's blocking, and he does get the ball periodically, but he makes our offense go because all the things he does when he doesn't have the football. So it's been great. I mean, I could not tell you, working on the offensive side of the ball, these guys have been great, unselfish, and all of them are team players, and that's why we're where we are right now.
Defensively, the Bearcats give up 27 points per game and 385 yards per game, but rank in the top 4 in the PAC in terms of third down defense and red zone defense. And the Bearcats' 12 fourth down stops are the most in the PAC.
We've gotten it done when we had to. We're never going to be happy, giving up 250 yards rushing. But we are, a bend but don't break type defense. And Coach Rohr is, who has come in this year, as our new defensive coordinator. He's pushing the right buttons. We do give up yards, we give up points, but like you said, we are, when push comes to shove and everything's on the line, we seem to get it done. So hopefully that continues this weekend.
Saint Vincent enters the week as one of 4 unbeaten teams in conference play, but the only 4-0 team in the PAC. However, the schedule for the Bearcats takes a difficult turn in the month of October. SVC plays at Case Western, at Westminster, Thomas More, and at W&J in the next 4 weeks, in a stretch that could define the season.
I think, a lot of people looking at what we have ahead of us probably, are thinking the same thing you are. What are we made of? I think, we're gonna play Case this weekend. We're gonna worry about them, and win or lose, we're gonna go on to the next week. I think the PAC, it's a situation where we're gonna be probably the underdogs the next 4 weeks, and we may be the underdogs the next 6 weeks. That's like that old cliche. That's why you play the game. We're going to go out there and fly by the seat of our pants and do whatever we can to try to get a win every single week. So our record won't define us as a team. Obviously, we want to win every game, but a successful football season doesn't always mean you have to win every game. So, we're going to prepare, and, we're banged up on defense, but that's, we just say next man up, let's go. Who's next to play? But, next 4 weeks should be fun. We know we're playing some very good football teams. We get to play W&J, and we haven't played them yet. So, we get a chance to play, one of the premier teams in the country. And obviously the next 4 games, those are teams that are ranked in the country. So we know what we're up against.
This week's opponent for the Bearcats are the Case Western Reserve Spartans. Case comes off a 35-7 win over Waynesburg and comes into the matchup with the highest scoring offense in the PAC. Case bullied Waynesburg on the ground, outrushing the Jackets 286-57. St. Vincent's defense allowed Grove City's Wesley Schools to run for 236 yards and 3 touchdowns last week. St. Vincent's run D certainly will be tested against Case Western.
Coach Debelak and I we coach together and play football together, so I know him very well. Looking at us on paper and the yards we're giving up on the ground, I would try to establish the run. I think our first and foremost we have to stop the run. We have to do a better job. How we do that again is really to play assignment football. And I think last week when Grove City start moving the ball against us, I think some of our players maybe have got out of out of whack a little bit in terms of what their assignments were. So we worked really hard this week so far in trying to fix that. And we know Kuda. I think he had his breakout game against us last year, and we know he's dangerous. He's dangerous with his arm, and he's definitely dangerous with his legs. If he doesn't see anything that he likes downfield, he's going to take off and run. So we got our hands full, there's no doubt, defensively.
Offensively, the pressure is on to score with Case Western's high-powered offense. The combination of Coach Debelak and quarterback Rob Kuda is 10-3, with opponents needing to score at least 31 points in each of Case's 3 losses. Coach Dolciato believes it all starts up front for the Bearcats this Saturday.
I think our offensive line has to play well. You could look at what we're doing offensively, and we've had some explosive plays, and we have great skilled players, and we have a great quarterback. I think our offensive line has been, maybe underappreciated in maybe a lot of people's visions, maybe even my own, but they've played well. We need them to play well. If we could do that up front, I think the key, anytime is, you want to say, well, your quarterback has to play well, and I understand that, but in order for your quarterback to play well, your offensive line, has to play well. And in order to stop the offense, your defensive line has to play well. So those are going to be 2 major factors. And Case is good on both sides of the ball up front. So we got a tall task.
The best season since football returned to St. Vincent was a 6-5 campaign in 2011, in which the Bearcats qualified for an ECAC Bowl. The Bearcats are on track to top that mark, and the community and campus has embraced the team and the moment.
Yeah, well, last week, it was homecoming, but we've never had a crowd like we had last week. So I think there's, besides the alumni and the parents that come and things like that for homecoming, I think there's been renewed interest in the community of Latrobe. Like, what's going on? Let's go check this out. Our student body has been great. And, it's always great for a campus to have a successful football team. We still have a ways to go. We're still, we're going to try to get better every week, and we're going to try to get better every year. And, our goal is ultimately to win a national championship. But the excitement over at St. Vincent's, probably football-wise, is at an all-time high. Our basketball team both of those are very good. So it's good to be joined in that group for right now, and hopefully, again, we could keep this process going with the football team and get a win this weekend.
Coach Dolciato is one of 3 current PAC coaches that come from John Carroll University. It will be a matchup between old friends whenever St. Vincent, Case Western, or Thomas More get together this season.
We've gotten into the league. The league's gotten better. So it's a very, crazy the way things go. Coach Devilac and I played together over at John Carroll. Then we coached together probably for 10 years. And then he went off to Case with as an assistant over there. And but Regis Scaife was with us through that time as well. And then Coach Scaife became the head coach over at John Carroll. Coach Scaife was the head coach at Case for a while too. So, but we are all really good friends. Coach Scaife is just an unbelievable man. I respect him. Beside my father, I don't think I respect anybody more than Coach Scaife. He is such a good person, and every game, I'm rooting for Thomas More unless they're playing the Bearcats. And Coach Devilac's the same way. I mean, I'm rooting for Case and Coach Devs, but not this week. But we are all really close. A lot of the coaches on the Case staff coached at John Carroll, and I'm good friends with all of them. So it's John Carroll's got a great tradition of coaches and players and things like that. And right now we're Coach Devilac's a Spartan, I'm a Bearcat, and that's where we came from. But these are who we are now, and he would say the same thing. And I love it over here at St. Vincent. They've treated me, really, really well, and it's been a great run so far.
Thanks to Ron Dolciato and Saint Vincent College for being on the PAC Football Focus. Up next is Washington and Jefferson College and 6-time PAC championship coach Mike Sirianni. Stay tuned for the PAC Pregame Show coming up next on pacathletics.org.
I'm Joe Anderko, Commissioner of the President's Athletic Conference. Want to know what makes the PAC so special? Here's a few reasons why.
Comprised of 10 private institutions and 2 affiliate members, the PAC remains unique in this era of high-pressure college athletics. Now sponsoring 21 sports as it celebrates over 60 years of competition, the PAC is regarded as one of the elite NCAA Division III conferences in the nation. Our student athletes excel in athletics as well as the classroom, with numerous postgraduate scholarship winners, over 150 academic All-Americans, and over 900 academic honorable recipients with a 3.6 GPA or higher in the past year alone. Want to learn more? Visit us at www.pacathletics.org or follow the President's Athletic Conference on social media.
Academic and athletic excellence since 1955, the President's Athletic Conference.
Welcome to the PAC Pregame Show here on pacathletics.org. Andy Stanko with you. Joining me today, fellow Waynesburg University students, seniors Austin Anderson and Brendan Keany. And gentlemen, before we dive in to a fun Week 5 of matchups, a couple of unbeaten teams in conference play going at it this week, we will take a look back at week number 4. Your winners are Westminster, Thomas More, Case Western, Geneva, and St. Vincent. I'll open the floor to you guys. What stood out from week number 4 in the PAC?
Well, 2 games really stood out to me. The first one, Carnegie Mellon at Thomas More. Thomas More did not blow Carnegie Mellon out of the water, which is something that we were expecting, considering that
Coming off a big win over
against
W&J
the week before. So I think that's something that was surprising. I guess there's 2 scopes at it. One, Thomas More didn't win by as much as people were expecting. But B, Carnegie Mellon was able to really hang in there and play tough. And I think the other game to look at was Waynesburg and Case Western. Despite Case Western being the dominant team and end up running up the score late in the game, Waynesburg, with a backup quarterback in Tyler Perrone, was able to stay in that game all the way up until the end of the third quarter, only being down by 2 scores, which I think was a moral victory for the Waynesburg football team.
Yeah, I'm looking at a couple games. I really like the statement Westminster made against Bethany, really establishing themselves as one of the top teams in the PAC. And you said, I think last week, Andy, that there's now been a full calendar year since Westminster has lost a football game.
Exactly.
And so that will set up a huge matchup against Thomas More this week. And then Geneva and Teal, 2 teams that have been surprises thus far this season. Geneva able to pull out a good game, 35-27 over the Tomcats. And that triple option is working extremely well for Geneva. And the defense is playing well enough to keep them in games.
Yeah, Geneva off this week, but Trawan Marshall, touchdown runs of 70 and 63 yards in the win over Teal. And talking to Coach DeMarco, this didn't make it onto the Focus last week, but he said that this could be a big play offense. We're just waiting for that breakthrough. And Trawan Marshall, currently the second leading rusher in the PAC, coming out of nowhere for Geneva. Other highlights for the week for me were Thomas Moore's defense, holding Sam Benger under 100 yards, and Saint Vincent picking up another win, starting the year 4-0. And we'll touch on that matchup with Case Western Reserve as our final game here on the pregame show. But let's take a look at the first matchup here in week number 5, and another battle of unbeaten teams. Number 16 Thomas More travels to New Wilmington, Pennsylvania to take on the Westminster Titans. Brendan, you mentioned it in the opening segment. The last loss for Westminster occurred over 1 calendar year ago. That loss for the Titans was to Thomas More in New Wilmington. The Saints won 45-14. Since then, Westminster's won 10 straight games and held opponents to fewer than 10 points 7 different times. And in that big Thomas More win, the Saints intercepted Paul Colombo and Shimon Walker a total of 4 times. Jensen Gebhardt passed for over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. The game was just 10-0 Saints at the half, but then Thomas More poured it on in the second half, scoring the first 4 possessions and then running an interception back for a touchdown. So that 10-0 lead became a 45-0 lead before Westminster scored twice late. Obviously, last week, Thomas More escaping CMU, a 20-16 win, and the defense continues to impress me from the Saints. A week after shutting down WJ's high-octane passing attack, the Saint defense held CMU's Sam Benger to 55 yards on 22 carries. That's 2.5 yards per carry. Benger had been held under 100 yards just once in the last season plus, and that was against Westminster last season. Thomas More turned the ball over 3 times and missed a field goal, and the defense really picked up the Saints. Austin Copeland, your PAC Defensive Player of the Week, 11 tackles, 2 interceptions. And on the other side, Westminster, another dominant defensive performance. Bethany held to 221 yards, 4 for 17 on third down. Westminster's offense turned the ball over 3 times. Both scores for Bethany came off turnovers inside Westminster territory. Literally all 16 points the Titans have given up this year have been because of turnovers by their offense. They've been that good. So, gentlemen, Westminster, Thomas More, a battle of perhaps the 2 best defenses in the PAC. What do you see in this matchup?
I think they're definitely the 2 best defenses in the PAC. I mean, you look at both of these teams, you're just running down the lineup there, Stanko, just stacked on both sides for both defenses overall. I think this is going to be a really good game. I think one thing that could prove to be the difference is Thomas Moore's ability offensively. Westminster's got a good offense too, but when you have Brennan Kuntz at quarterback, really being a solid force throughout the year, I mean, you go up and down this lineup as well. I mean, look at the rushing game as well. I mean, CT Tarrant, a really good rusher, has 465 yards so far on the season, 4 touchdowns. He's averaging 116 yards a game. You're looking at the wideouts as well. I mean, Dalen Garland is really having a good year. 431 yards, getting 107 yards per game, getting 20 receptions total on the year. This is really a solid offense too, but not to get away from Westminster. Really a solid team as well. Paul Colombo at quarterback really can do a lot with his feet too, as well as throwing the ball. And then look at their receiving team. Demetrius Bentley so far leads the team in reception yards with only 110 thus far. So I think that's something that leans towards Thomas More. But again, Westminster's defense is so stout that they're going to be in this game and definitely could win the game as well.
I think one thing that you need to keep an eye on in this game is Paul Colombo. He might be the X factor of this game for Westminster. Obviously, coming out of the quarterback position, that seems like an easy thing to say. But if Paul Colombo can have a big day and the defense for Westminster can be as solid as they've been through the first 3 games of their season, I think this is going to be an extremely close, extremely solid matchup. One thing I do want to highlight, Dominique McKinley finally had a day that is good. I mean, he ran for 22 rushes, 110 or 96 yards, I'm sorry. He averaged 4.4 yards per rush. They're going to need him to be solid. They're going to need Colombo to be solid. I really like Thomas More's defense, as you mentioned, Andy, holding W&J to 9 points. And then, of course, last week having another fantastic performance. One thing I do want to mention for Thomas More is that they were able to give the ball back to C.T. Tarrant. He had kind of an off week last week. This week, he had 25 rushes for 125 yards. He didn't lose a single yard on the day, which is a good sign for the offensive line as well as him. 5 yards per rush and a touchdown. Javier Pitts with a touchdown as well. And then Dalton Conway, just another weapon for Thomas More.
Yep.
Dalen Garland only had 1 reception last week, although he's had a great season so far. It was Dalton Conway who stepped up. They have a lot of depth on offense, and if they can spread the ball around, they can have a good day as well.
2 defensive notes I want to highlight, one for either team. Dustin Mitchell for Thomas More on critical third down red zone situations against CMU last week. 2 3rd and 2s late in the game, both times in the TMC red zone. 2 tackles for loss against the nation's leading rusher from a season ago. That's big time. And you held CMU to multiple field goals in the red zones. The only time Thomas More gave up a touchdown on the day was a punt return inside of the Thomas More red zone. The Saints were excellent when it mattered, and especially at the end of the game. CMU got the ball back, down 4, 2:58 to go, got the stop, interception, game over. And on the other side for Westminster, playing a Bethany team that the week before had scored 47 points, Chase Keeneman, 511 yards of total offense, Tyler Ambush, 18 catches, Ambush held without a catch, 0 catches for 12 yards. I don't know how that works out, maybe a hook and ladder, but that is outstanding. 1 catch or no catches for Tyler Ambush, a guy who Bethany really focuses on getting the football to. He was shut down, and that goes to show you how good this secondary can be for Westminster. As we mentioned, a 10-game win streak for the Titans. That streak, however, doesn't include a win over Thomas More, W&J, or Case Western Reserve. The best win, I'd argue, in this streak is against CMU or against St. John Fisher in the Bowl. And for Westminster, I don't think this offense can afford to hurt itself in terms of turnovers. You mentioned Dominique McKinley. Nice day, 96 yards on the ground, 3 fumbles. He lost 2 of them last week. Now, Westminster's defense was able to just make that go away against Bethany when they built a big lead, but I'm not sure they'll get away with that against Thomas More, and that's how they lost to the Saints last week. And Thomas More's biggest challenge for the rest of the season is this game. Opened the year with Franklin, W&J, CMU, and Westminster. If Thomas More survives, it's Grove City, Waynesburg, Saint Vincent, Bethany, and Teal. Maybe the Saint Vincent game is a really competitive game, the way the Bearcats have been going, but Thomas More will be heavy favorites from here on out. And I'll say this about the Saints. I feel like the identity of this team is different this year. It's not the 49-point-per-game juggernaut that we saw last season with Jensen Gebhardt really putting the ball down the field and Terrence having a great year. A lot of the personnel was similar, but the receivers really stood out to me, Goose Cohorn in particular. But Brendan Kutz, 11 for 25, 201, 2 interceptions. I think he needs to be a little bit better in a game against Westminster this week. But we will move on from that matchup between 2 unbeaten teams to a matchup between 2 teams still searching for their first victory. The Waynesburg University Yellow Jackets travel to Grove City College to take on the Wolverines. Both teams 0-4 in the season, 0-2 in PAC play, and it's homecoming for Grove City. And last season it was Waynesburg beating Grove City 35-31 on the Jackets' homecoming game, thanks to a Jerry Lawman touchdown run with under a minute to play in regulation. It absolutely could have been a win for Grove City College. But here's the thing about last year's game. Both teams, leading rusher, leading passer, and the guy who caught the most passes, gone. Either graduated, playing a different position, not in a leading role. You look at Waynesburg, it was Jerry Lawman on the ground, Jake Doherty at quarterback, Dan Davis, Willie Lavelle, 2 of the top targets for Waynesburg. And on the other side, Grove City, Matt Pennypacker taking snaps, Marcus Ubinger in the backfield, Tyler Patterson, the leading receiver. So there's been so much turnover with these 2 teams it's hard to look back at that matchup and come away with anything. Waynesburg, 35-7 losers, a game we're very familiar with, against Case Western Reserve last week. Collegiate debut for quarterback Tyler Perrone, 4 interceptions in the day, 200 yards and a touchdown. On the other side, Grove City lost at Saint Vincent 57-32. Grove City's given up at least 55 points in each of the last 3 games. St. Vincent's Derek Stewart passed for 442 yards and 7 touchdowns to pick up his second Offensive Player of the Week. And Grove City, that's the second time in 4 weeks that they've allowed that accolade. Pete Coughlin, of course, threw for 7 touchdowns and 1/2 against this Grove City defense a couple weeks ago. So 2 teams still searching for their first win. 2 teams that have had very difficult schedules early on. Waynesburg's had Case Western, CMU, and Westminster. And on the other side, you've got Grove City looking at W&J, Case Western, and St. Vincent the last 3 weeks. So I think both teams are really sort of relieved to be seeing each other, and one of them is going to come away with a win.
I think one intriguing line to see in this game, we know what Brett LaFoon can do. We saw him week 1 in a non-conference bout really show off his arm.
300 yards, 3 touchdowns against Juniata.
Grove City records for single game. And then since then, he's really tapered down since facing PAC conference teams. And you look at last week, he still had a pretty decent day, 198 yards, a touchdown, and interception, 18 for 35. But the guy who really shined, Wesley Schools, had 236 yards and 3 touchdowns on 39 carries. If there's something that Waynesburg is licking their chops at going this game, is they know their run defense has been pretty stout throughout the year, especially in the front 4. So if they can collapse and be able to stop Schools, I mean, they're definitely in good shape. As that being said, though, I think Brett LaFoon could also have a very productive day in the Waynesburg secondary, which has its problems throughout the years. I think both teams, this is really the first matchup where both teams really like what they're seeing going into the matchup. Just one team has to come out with the victory, and we'll see what happens on Saturday.
Yeah, I agree with you, Austin. Wesley Schools, phenomenal day. As you mentioned, he averaged over 6 yards a carry. One thing I want to look at is the receiving core for Grove City. Had a pretty solid day. LaFoon was able to spread the ball around a little bit. 5 receptions, 60 yards, and a TD for Nick Ponigvar. And David Folkmeyer and Brett Pinson also with over 40 yards receiving, both of them 5 receptions, 40 yards for Folkmeyer, 3 receptions, 61 yards for Pinson. So I think if they can spread the ball around a little bit, it takes a little bit of pressure off Wesley Schools. And one thing I do want to mention about Grove City is I think offensively they should have been fairly happy with the day that they had. 26 first downs to St. Vincent's 22. That's solid. They had 192 rushing yards in total, 198 passing yards. That's not a bad day for the Grove City offense. I think one thing they need to look at a little bit, once again, I've been harping on this for a couple weeks, is secondary play. 442 yards they gave up through the air as Derek Stewart, as you mentioned, Andy, had a phenomenal day. And I'm not saying that they will see a quarterback as proficient as Derek Stewart against Waynesburg, but big plays have hurt Grove City all season long. If Waynesburg can stretch the field a little bit, they could take a little bit of swagger out of the offense that wants to control the ball for Grove City. I think this is a very intriguing matchup. I think it could go either way, really. And as you said, one of these teams is coming away with a win.
Austin, I think you hit the point, and really what may be the deciding factor of this game is who wins in terms of rushing offense versus defense. And last week, Waynesburg was just bullied on the ground. Case Western Reserve outrushed the Jackets 286 yards to 57. Waynesburg averaged 2.2 yards per carry, is the 10th ranked rushing attack, the worst offense in terms of putting up points in total offense. And on the other side, Grove City comes in as the worst defense in points given up on total defense. And I think both of those numbers, Waynesburg and Grove City, the ineptitude offensively and defensively, are a result of Waynesburg playing Westminster and Case so early in the year, which are stout run defenses, and Grove City playing W&J and Case Western, high-powered offenses, top returning quarterbacks in the conference. However, there needs to be improvement for both of those groups. Will Waynesburg be able to pass the ball down the field on this Grove City defense like the other teams have been doing? For the Jackets, in terms of receiving, Mitch Kendra's been that guy, 18 yards per catch. He was sort of shut down last week, just 1 reception and a whole bunch of targets. Kevin Barnes, 17 catches on the year, 200 yards, a couple of touchdowns, but not to the level we saw him at last year. He doesn't know Perrone or isn't as familiar with Perrone as he was with Jake Doherty. And flat out, that run defense against Case Western, the decision was made by the coaching staff and Coach Shepis in a conversation this week. He said, we played a lot of dime. We played a lot of that 3-down lineman stack dime look that we have. We wanted to take away the screen game, and they ran all over the Jackets. Jacob Burke put up 163 yards and 4 touchdowns. Cooter ran for another 83 yards. I feel like you absolutely need to stop the run in this matchup, especially with a younger quarterback. And I feel like you look at Grove City, no team has allowed more sacks. No team has thrown more interceptions. I expect to see a very aggressive Jacket defense led by defensive coordinator Scott Vienick, and they'll get after the quarterback this week. And I think that's a necessity because this Waynesburg offense, talking to Coach Shepis, has really let down the Waynesburg defense and special teams time and time again already this season.
I think most definitely, and I really do look forward to this matchup. And I think when you look, and I think we've both been hitting it, Stanko. I think this matchup really has the potential. Despite not being two high-powered teams, I think this matchup does have the potential to be one of the best played matchups between both sides. And I think this could be one of the more tight games in the PAC this week. And I think looking ahead onto Saturday, I think this will be a high-scoring game because I think both defenses have their flaws, and I think their offenses both have bright spots, but maybe they're not elite, but they both have the opportunity to go ahead and put points on the board. But you look at last week, Grove City scoring 32 points. You look at a Waynesburg offense, which didn't think they were going to score at all that much. I mean, they did only put up 7 points, but they moved the ball and had 4 turnovers inside the red zone. Then they definitely were moving the ball. I think it'll be fun to see this weekend.
Yep. All 4 interceptions for Perrone were in Case Western Reserve territory. So that game at Grove City, homecoming, one team will pick up their first victory. We'll move to our third matchup here in week number 5. It's the presidents of W&J traveling to Greenville, Pennsylvania to take on Teal Tomcats. It's a 3 o'clock kickoff. And these records are pretty similar too. Washington and Jefferson 2-1, 0-1 in PAC play. Teal Tomcats 2-2, 1-1 in conference play. And last season, W&J led Teal at the half 51-21, won that game 65-28. The Presidents scored the first 7 times the offense possessed the football, and 5 of those drives lasted fewer than 90 seconds. So, same old from W&J last year. Pete Coughlin, a nice day, 20 for 24, 363, 4 touchdowns without an interception.
Solid day.
Standard. And Ryan Ruffing, 18 carries, 134 yards, 4 touchdowns. Radke, 223 yards, a touchdown through the air, ran for another 149 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. However, it was just a one-man band for Teal. He accounted for all 28 points, either rushing or passing. He lacked some weapons around him when he played quarterback. And coming into this week, Teal lost to Geneva in week number 4, 35-27. And Geneva is a unique challenge for every PAC team that plays against the Golden Tornadoes because of the system. And honestly, it took Teal a quarter to adjust. And by the end of that first quarter, it's 21-7 Geneva, and Teal was never able to recover. The Tomcats gave up runs of 70 and 63 yards to Trayvon Marshall and a 45-yard touchdown run to Khalil Carter. They had trouble early, then allowed big plays late to allow Geneva to get to 35. And when Geneva gets to 35, they're possessing the football. They're doing their thing. They're playing even or with a lead, and that's very hard to win. Radke, 198 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. The 14 for 33 isn't as pretty, though, in terms of completion percentage. Ran for 5 yards a carry for 78 yards and a touchdown. It held in check, I would say, compared to some numbers we've seen put up from him this season. And W&J, on the other hand, a chance to really regroup after what was a 35-9 loss to Thomas More. And I was really shocked to see W&J's offense held to just 204 yards of total offense and 9 points. And to provide some perspective for that, Pete Coughlin, as W&J's starting quarterback since 2014, that offense has been held under 400 yards twice in the regular season. Westminster, 297 yards, and then 2 weeks ago, 204. This is an offense that regularly gets over 450 yards, and the team finished 3 for 16 on third down. Presidents turned the ball over 3 times, and Thomas More dominated field position. The game could have easily been worse than 35-9 because Thomas More fumbled and turned the ball over on downs in the red zone. So just a point here. W&J has never lost, coming off a loss, 19-0 in the regular season after a loss under Coach Sirianni. So for the Tomcats, a tall order taking on the Presidents this Saturday.
Oh, it's a very tall order. I think this is going to be a very matchup that's very heavily favored towards Washington Jefferson. You look at this team coming off, not playing last week, coming off of that bye, and then before losing to Thomas More, which really, with the short schedule, can really alter your playoff aspirations. And they need a lot of help now if they want to win the conference after that defeat the other week. But still, a very solid offense. Pete Coughlin, very, very solid this year already. In 3 games played, has 840 yards of passing with 12 touchdowns. This team, led by Coughlin, they're able to move the ball very well, very efficiently. You look at a Teal team who had trouble against Geneva early on. We thought this was a game that maybe Ryan Radke would be able to lead Teal to victory. They were unsuccessful.
That Geneva defense is sneaky.
It is. It
They're
really
very
is. I mean, they've given Waynesburg
especially with a lead.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, they've given many teams in the PAC a very tough time over the years. I mean, even that Saint Vincent game 2 weeks ago, we thought Geneva, I mean, they were able to stay into that game later than I would have expected. Too. So, I mean, so give some credit to Geneva overall. But looking at this matchup specifically, if Teal has any shot at winning this game, Ryan Radke's going to have the game of his life. And on top of that, there needs to be a few plays that go their way, because W&J is still a powerhouse in the conference despite the one setback, and with a bye week, they have something to prove.
One thing that I want to look at this game, and I want to, you kind of mentioned this, Austin, that it would be kind of a long shot, that a lot of things would have to go W&J's way in order to win the conference at this point. I think because the additions of Carnegie Mellon and Case into the conference, as well as the emergence as Westminster as a program, I think they can afford one loss.
I've got a number for you. The last 7 years before last year, when Thomas More ran the table and was the undisputed champion, the last 7 years there has been a 7-1 champion. So one loss doesn't necessarily mean you're out. And I'm talking to Coach Sirianni next week, and that's something we're going to talk about for W&J. It's being focused and winning out from here on out.
Absolutely. Well, go ahead.
Sorry, but one thing though, just to add on to that though, the one wild card in the PAC standings though we haven't seen in years past is the fact that Case Western Reserve is probably the favorite right now to win the conference, because if you have the tiebreak of the overall win-loss record, I mean, St. Vincent, yes, is leading the pack, but watch Case Western Reserve, a very friendly schedule in the back half of the year, not having that many tough opponents because of...
Well, no Thomas More, no W&J.
So they could really control their own destiny. So it's not always the fact of the one loss Thomas More versus W&J. We have a third team now as a wild card, and possibly St. Vincent too if cards roll their way. This isn't, as we were talking about, this isn't really a two-dog horse. And Westminster 3-0 right now. I mean, they got some tough opponents too, but really this conference could be any team to win it. And I don't think it's just a two-dog race.
This game, though, W&J, Teal Tomcats, W&J still
we went off
still in
a
it, yes.
tangent. But I think W&J, 2 weeks to prepare now for Teal. And you look, Ryan Radke, as you mentioned, Andy, I don't want to say he was shut down. He still statistically wasn't terrible. He still had 2 touchdowns through the air to his 1 interception, 198 yards. Yeah, you mentioned that he was only 14 of 33, and he was kept in check in the running game as well. Still not a horrible game. The bottom line is that Teal put up a solid fight against Geneva, a Geneva team that has an extremely solid defense, as you mentioned, Andy. I think Teal will give W&J a fight, but I'm a little concerned for the Tomcats because W&J has had 2 weeks to prepare. Pete Coughlin is going to be rested. The team is going to be healthy. I think this is going to be a solid game for W&J, and they have a little bit of chip on their shoulder after their loss 35-9 against Thomas More.
Teal has 2 losses on this season that were winnable football games against Geneva and Saint Vincent College, and the margin for error is significantly smaller against a team like Washington and Jefferson, especially the defensive lapses. Go ask Grove City College what happens when you make a mistake in the secondary against Washington and Jefferson. Coach DiDonato said, if you make a mistake, they score.
Well, it was
and
the
that's
first,
what happens.
They had 2 touchdowns on the first 3 plays of the game from scrimmage.
Yeah. That's what happens against this W&J team. And Teal's defense is dead last in defending the run. It'll be interesting to see if W&J can take advantage of that, because since the departure of Ryan Ruffing, it's been sort of by committee. Justin Vicklis was the guy against Thomas More, 13 carries, 38 yards. Under 3 yards a carry. The whole offense was shut down against Thomas More. And in the second half, the defense struggled a little bit. It was only 7-3 at the half, Thomas More and Jay, and then Thomas More scored on his first possession. W&J, 2 interceptions. Thomas More turns them into 14 points, and all of a sudden the Saints are off, and the Saints are running again. But for Teal, I do like some of the weapons Ryan Radke has now. Alex Horvatitz had a couple of touchdown catches last week. He's a familiar name. Eugene Bailey and Deshaun Bracey have been good receivers for Teal. They were held in check for the most part in terms of big plays last week. 5 catches each, 68 yards for Bailey, 59 yards for Bracey. But they're weapons for this Teal offense. And for Teal to stay with W&J, I think they need to score points. And that defense, 14 takeaways, 31% on third down. They've got to get off the field, turn the ball over. And against Geneva, the Golden Tornadoes fumbled 5 times, but Teal was only able to get 2 of them. So that is a key in this football game as well. But we have to move on. PAC championship talk aside from the last segment, to the Bethany Bison traveling to Carnegie Mellon, a 6 o'clock kickoff in Pittsburgh. And in this game, CMU won last year 56-35, in which the Tartans outgained Bethany 533 to 532. So it's a 20-point margin and only 1 point or 1 yard different in terms of total offense. So what do you think's the difference there? Once again for Bethany, interceptions. Lincoln Reyes threw for 368 yards, 4 touchdowns, but also 4 interceptions for the Bison. Eric Blinn, 13 catches, 100 yards. Jalen Holmes, 144 yards on the ground and a touchdown. But Sam Benger, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns. Andrew Herron, 222 yards, 4 touchdowns, and interception. John Prather, 3 touchdowns last year through the air. Lots of offensive fireworks from both sides, but once again, broken record with Bethany. Turnovers either defined a win or a loss for the Bison last year, and that was a loss against CMU. Now, both teams entered Week 4 last week off of offensive outbursts. Bethany, 49 points in the loss to Teal. CMU put up 35 behind backup quarterback Alex Klein's strong second half against Waynesburg, throwing a big run from Sam Banger, and both teams ran into some really good defenses last week. Bethany lost to Westminster 38-9, 221 yards of total offense for Bethany, only 3.3 yards per carry, 3 yards per passing attempt, 4 for 7 on third down. And for CMU, losers 2016 to Thomas More. Sam Benger, pardon me, held under 100 yards once as a starter, that against Westminster last season. 55 yards on 22 carries, and that's a quarter for him normally. Alex Klein was the one who got the start for CMU at quarterback after throwing for a couple of touchdowns coming in against Waynesburg. 19 for 34, 242, 1 touchdown, but 4 interceptions, 3 in Thomas More territory, 1 in the red zone. Both teams looking to bounce back here in week number 5. Take a look at the matchup, gentlemen.
Well, I think with Carnegie Mellon, the odd part about last week's game versus Thomas More was the fact that they were that close to Thomas More, and their primary option offensively was just shut down.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an interesting storyline to keep in mind. Sure, Thomas More, I mean, their defense was very outstanding there for Carnegie Mellon, which kept them in the game. I mean, you held the Cunts to 201 yards and 2 interceptions. I mean, that's a really solid game overall. But again, looking at that rushing game for Carnegie Mellon, which is something they want to improve, taking away the two rushes for 15 yards lost, which is sacks for Klein because of college, you count rushing yards as sacks.
Exactly.
So let's take that away of the fray. They still, between Rory Hubbard and Sam Benger, they ran for 69 yards offensively. I mean, that's a number they need to improve against, and I think they will against Bethany. I mean, Thomas More, again, being one of the top 2 defenses in all the PAC. Benger, if he doesn't get 150 yards, that would be just shocking. I mean, Waynesburg played arguably one of the best defensive games prior to this against him, and he still rushed for 190 yards. So I think looking ahead to this matchup, you can count on Benger for getting 200 yards. Bethany's defense is decent, but it's not to the level of Thomas More. I think this should be a good bounce-back game for Carnegie Mellon. Not that their last game was all that bad, but at least they can get back
for
to
the
win
offense at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I look at for Bethany is that, of course, Bethany played against Westminster, so this is bound to happen. But Chase Keeneman really had a tough day. 12 of 31, 94 yards, and he was sacked 4 times. Of course, that's not a stat line. That's totally unexpected against a defense such as Westminster. But I do want to mention for Bethany, Raekwon Wright. He had a solid game, 20 rushes for 87 yards and a touchdown.
Yeah, he's coming on in the last few weeks.
Absolutely.
No Jalen Holmes again for Bethany.
And so I think that's one thing they got to keep an eye on. Can they get Wright to be a big part of their offense, and that's going to be huge. Can Keeman have a bounce-back day? And we saw that this team can put up points. They put up solid points against Teal.
Yeah, 47.
Exactly. If their defense was a little bit better against Teal, then they have a win this season. And of course, you can say what if all the time, but we have seen that Bethany can have solid offensive output. Keenman, I believe, threw over 400 yards in that game. He can have a solid, or maybe 300 yards, but I think this team is still trying to figure out its identity on offense. Wright is giving them a viable option in the backfield, and Keenman, of course, these days are going to happen, especially with a first-year starter against a defense like Westminster's. But Carnegie Mellon, what an effort against Thomas More, coming off the win against Waynesburg to go to to play against Thomas More, only lose by 4 points, really be in that game. And as you mentioned, Austin, have your number one offensive option, one of the top options in the entire conference, be shut down and still be in that game. I think that's tremendous for the coaching staff of Carnegie Mellon and for the team as a whole.
Yeah, tip the cap to the Tartan defense. 3 takeaways, a red zone stop in the form of a missed field goal for Thomas More. Tarrant ran for 125 yards. Kuntz threw for 18 yards of completion, but 20 points on the board for Thomas More's offense. You're in position to win that football game. And CMU's lone touchdown, though, came after a punt return set up the offense on the Thomas More 12. I've been impressed with CMU's punt return team against Waynesburg. They did it again against Thomas More. Got into the red zone 3 times. All 3 times besides that ended in Tartan field goals, including situations that CMU had 2nd and goal from the 1, 2 straight Benger carries, -3 yards. Next drive for CMU, 2nd and 2 from the Thomas More 11, incomplete, Benger loss of 3, field goal. The defense got the offense the ball back for a final drive with 2:58 to go, interception on the 2nd play, so chances were there. CMU was absolutely in that football game until the final drive of the game. They just weren't able to get it done in the red zone. Stanley Bickledge, 12 tackles. Samra Abdelmonte, 12 tackles, a fumble recovery, a nice punt return to set up a touchdown. CMU in a very similar position to last year, in which the Tartans started 1-3, reeled off 7 in a row. The season isn't lost yet here at 1-2, but this is a matchup I don't think CMU can afford to overlook. Bethany's 8th in run defense, giving up 193 yards, over 4 yards a carry. But last year, it was 4 touchdown passes from CMU and 5 interceptions that really swung, and 4 interceptions from Bethany that swung the game. Benger will get his, but I'm not sure how much we're going to get from the quarterback position from CMU. Alex Klein, good against Waynesburg coming into the fray, not so great against Thomas More, and this is the Bethany defense who will get after you. Another 3 takeaways last week, all of them fumbles. Bethany's defense leads the PAC with 14 takeaways through 4 weeks. The offense just hasn't taken advantage. Hard to draw any conclusions, especially offensively, from Bethany's last outing against Westminster. Tyler Ambush, from 18 catches to no catches or 1 catch. I expect to see him much more involved. Westminster, that secondary, all conference guys all over the place. Todd Jeter's one of the top corners in the PAC, and I like Wright as a player. Keenman, look for him to have a bounce back. And what Bethany offense will we see? That's my biggest question. Was the 47-point explosion just because Teal's defense gave up big plays late? I like Wright. Ambrose needs to make a larger impact, and the schedule does not get easier for Bethany. After this week, home against Case, at W&J, at Thomas More, a brutal October, and this week against the team that's 1-2 in CMU, Bethany 1-3, maybe its best chance is going to win here in this month. But we will move to our final game here on the pregame show, our featured matchup. Saint Vincent travels to Case Western. Saint Vincent, the only 4-0 football team in the PAC. Case Western 3-0, already having its bye. There are right now 4 unbeaten teams in the PAC. There will only be 2 this time next week. Saint Vincent and Case square off. Westminster, Thomas More square off. And Case Western beat Saint Vincent soundly last season. The Spartans led 35-0 after 17 minutes of football. Rob Kuda, 23 of 30, 236 yards, 4 touchdowns, ran for 145 yards, and St. Vincent ran for 27 yards on 30 carries. That really defines the day, and this is your big battle of unbeaten teams. Case has had its bye already, 3 wins over Chicago, Grove City, and Waynesburg. Teams with a combined 1-10 record. St. Vincent is 4-0 with wins over Alma, Teal, Geneva, and Grove City, teams with a combined record of 6-9. Case is the team that entered receiving top 25 votes and still is, and actually is ranked in some polls. But either way, this game, the winner it'll be the biggest win of the season thus far. Saint Vincent, the best start since the 1957 season, and this is a very good chance of being the best team the school has had since the program re-upped in 2007. The 2011 team went 6-5 and was invited to an ECAC Bowl. Saint Vincent beat Grove City 57-32. That game was close into the third quarter when Grove City kicked a field goal to make it 30-25 Bearcats. However, Saint Vincent scored 20 unanswered points to make it 50-25 into the fourth, and Derek Stewart broke his own modern-day passing record he set in Week 1 for St. Vincent by passing for 442 yards, 7 touchdowns, without an interception. In Case Western, methodical is the word I'll use to describe the win over Waynesburg. All of us were watching this game closely. Case outrushed the Jackets 286-57, 6 yards per carry for Case. Waynesburg turned the ball over 4 times. So what do we see in this matchup?
I think this will be a very good matchup. But I like what Case Western Reserve has done thus far on their schedule, really having some good, respectable wins, and really giving a good thumping to their opponents. And I think, yes, the margin of victory for Case Western a little bit larger than St. Vincent, but that's not to...
Remember, the teams that Case has beaten combined 1-10 record
Right.
coming into Week 5 now.
So I think this week's really going to show us who the top dogs in the PAC are, as we do have these two undefeated matchups that are going to be happening this day. And I think this game in Cleveland will really be a force to see kind of what's going to happen in the latter half of the PAC standings. But Rob Kuda, just really a solid quarterback for Case Western, really coming in his own even this year, really being a solid offensive presence. Both he can move his legs a little bit, but definitely throwing the football as well. I think Case Western, with their ability and their defense too, being really solid, I think that could be a difference in the game. St. Vincent, of course, as we talked about Geneva, very tough team to play against, but you saw a couple red flags. Despite being undefeated, there were a couple close calls there for St. Vincent. Case Western, again, as we mentioned, they have played some easier opponents, but they really have left all of them in the dust, despite Waynesburg hanging in there a lot last week. I think
Hanging in there defined as being down 21-7 in the third.
Yes, but they kept it close, which many of us thought that it would have been a 3 or 4 score game by that point at the end of the third quarter. So I think this will be a good matchup between these two teams. I think Case Western really has some good opportunities up ahead. But again, this is going to be a really good matchup in Cleveland, and because they're home as well. I think that's a couple-hour drive there for St. Vincent on Case Western's home turf.
I think one thing you have to look at is if you're St. Vincent, you got to play turnover-free football. And Derek Stewart was able to do that last week with his monster game of 442 yards, 7 TDs. He threw 0 interceptions. And that is going to be key for St. Vincent against Case Western. I think Waynesburg proved that with a solid passing game, you can kind of play, until they started handing off, Case Western that is, until they started to really establish their run game with Jacob Burke, who had 4 touchdowns. He had a fantastic day. I think until they really started to realize that, Waynesburg's passing game was really doing a solid job of going down the field. The problem, as you mentioned earlier, Andy, was the turnovers.
Yep.
4 interceptions in Case territory. I think there were 2 of them that were actually in the end zone. So smarter decisions there for Waynesburg, and that's a different ballgame entirely. With a quarterback like Derek Stewart and the numbers that he can put up, I think this game could be extremely close. It will also come down to St. Vincent's defense as well. Can they stop Jacob Burke? Will Rob Kuda have a bounce-back day from kind of an average day by his standards against Waynesburg and establish himself in the run and pass game? In the passing game, it was 3 receivers he found throughout the entire game. And I think for him, he needs to spread the ball a little bit better, establish his own running game a little bit. And I think Waynesburg, for the most part, did a nice job of shutting them down early. But once they got the running game going, they were gone. If St. Vincent can play with Derek Stewart and go tick for tat with Case Western, I think it's going to be a really solid matchup.
Yeah, I was surprised to see Rob Kuda for the first time live. He didn't wow me, and he didn't need to wow me, because they were just able to run the football so effectively. He only passed the ball 17 times and found Brendan Lynch for over 100 yards in those pass attempts. And so they were able to run at will. St. Vincent just allowed Grove City run for 236 yards with Wesley Schools. that's certainly a matchup to look out for between old friends Coach Dolciato and Coach Debelak.
And I think, too, as you're mentioning, he didn't wow you. He didn't wow me in the passing game. I mean, he only had 124 yards passing. I mean,
Didn't need to.
Yeah, exactly. It was the running game. I mean, himself, too. I mean, Burke had 163 yards and 4 scores. Kuda himself had 83 yards rushing and a score. So, really, this team didn't need... It's their rushing and their defense, which really, that kind of style of football does win championships. We've seen this so much in the past of teams, no matter what league, defensive. If they can have a good defense and be able to move the ball and control the clock as well, that can win you some ball games, especially has some good special teams as well.
One thing I do want to mention about Rob Kuda, seeing him in person, was how well he manages third down. You could almost predict what was going to happen every single time. The pocket was going to collapse a little bit. He couldn't find a receiver. Guess what? He could take off for 7-8 yards by himself and just slide down. No big deal. He has an incredible ability to keep drives alive with his feet. And that's going to be something that St. Vincent's going to need to figure out a little bit also if they want to win this possession game against Case Western, who really dominated possession against Waynesburg.
In order to beat Case Western Reserve with Rob Kuda at quarterback, you need to score over 30 points. This team is 10-3 in Kuda's starts. 3 losses are to Chicago, Thomas More, and CMU. 31-30, 36-32, 52-42. You must score because Case Western will score. St. Vincent sitting 2nd in passing offense, 3rd in scoring offense. Derek Stewart is your leading passer in the PAC. Not because he's thrown for 300 yards in all 4 games, but he's had 2 monster games for Saint Vincent College, and I think that's what he's going to need this week as well. In the other 2 games, he threw for 369 yards combined with just 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions. So really, it's been feast or famine with him, but the red zone offense has been awesome. We talked about this with Coach on the Football Focus, and the 3rd down offense has been phenomenal as well for St. Vincent, and keeping Case Western off the field, that's certainly a key. And on the other side, the matchup, St. Vincent's 10th ranked run defense against that rushing attack of Case Western. Case has dominated who it's needed to dominate. Top 2 scoring offense and defense, top 2 total offense and defense, top 2 run defense, best 3rd down team in the PAC, converting 57% of the time, holding teams to 23% conversions, 8 turnovers forced in 4 games. Something has to give. Case Western hasn't been challenged really in the second half of any games, hasn't given up a point in the second half of any games. St. Vincent, on the other hand, has played 2 competitive games this year already against Teal and against Geneva, so we'll see how it shapes up. It looks to be a very interesting matchup, and up and down the PAC, Week 5 is just loaded with records that are very similar up and down the conference. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me here on the PAC Pregame Show. Be sure to tune in next week when we talk to head coach Mike Sirianni of Washington and Jefferson here on PACathletics.org.